it's Jennifer here from Belladonna's Botanicals, and tonight I am posing the question to read or not to read. That is the question. So I am, and as I've mentioned, a gigantic nerd, also with the ADHD and neurodivergent hyperfixation on things. I really enjoy reading and learning all that I can about various aspects of the occult. And I think that's really important. Now, I come at things from a very academic background because I do hold a degree in art history and studio arts. So I spend a lot of time studying things and reading. Because that's my background and that's kind of how I um, learn. And, I'm not someone, especially with my practice, not only in how I practice magic, but in the products that I create. I'm not just going to go be like, woohoo, I'm an herbalist now, and never having taken any classes in herbalism or read anything about herbalism or anything like that, because that can be dangerous. So there is an importance that can be placed upon your occult education and practices. And there are a lot of people I've run into. Some of them are colleagues and friends of mine, and we're all entitled to our opinions, who are just like, oh, well, I never read anything about from other occult authors, or I never, or just kind of look down upon that. Like, and it's very baffling to me because that's just not how I think. I may not pick up a book and do I'm very rarely, if ever, do any rituals out of a book, but I like to read about other people's experiences and I like to see how they do things. Um, or just learning different aspects of a practice, especially if it's something like I don't know anything about, a real very minimal at best, about like Norse heathenry and Norse practices. Am I gonna just be like, woohoo, I work with Odin now and I know absolutely nothing about the Norse pantheon, Norse mythology and lore? That seems a little bit inauthentic to me. To be doing things now, you can connect, and we all have our natural talents and stuff. You can connect with that current, but I feel like there's a level of research and knowledge that needs to be done. And I'm not entirely sure sometimes why there is a stigma against that. Because I have seen that sometimes, where I've seen it go both ways. So one, you've got the category of people who are just kind of like, well, I don't need to read books, blah, 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 or I'm just not interested in that. Hey, we're not all readers. We don't all hyperfixate on things the way I hyperfixate on them. I get that. But there is something that's integral in understanding at least the history of the occult, or understanding the mythology and lore and different things from different areas. Whether you're looking at an entity like Lucifer, you should at least be familiar with the biblical lore and the stuff about fallen angels and all of that, and how Lucifer figures into that, and different mythologies. Or if you are someone who identifies as Luciferian, maybe read some books on Luciferianism, because there's a lot of people out there calling themselves Luciferians and Satanists who are, you've obviously never read a single book on it, and it shows. So yeah, there's a way of developing your practice for yourself and in your own, sort of, whatever you want to call it, moral guidelines or whatnot, or ethos or philosophy or whatnot. But if it's into a greater cosmos and a greater rubric of these types of practices, whether you're looking at something in the context of Satanism. So, there's a lot of different ways you can look at that historically. You might want to have a little bit of knowledge on Satan as it pertains to the Christian Bible, or how Satan or that type of figure comes up in different religions and cultures and how it was treated. So walking into that blindly and calling yourself a Satanist is kind of, I don't even know. But so having some rudimentary understanding, some knowledge on it. It's not saying that you have to pick up the Satanic Bible and do all the rituals in there and whatnot to be a Satanist. I mean, I think I don't think I've ever read the entire Satanic Bible in its. I am reading it, but I'm familiar enough with it. But from what I know and have looked at with the rituals, am I going to go do those rituals exactly as they are in the book because that's the way Anton Zandra LaVey did them? Probably not. And you don't have to. And a lot of what I talk about on my channel is not being married to doing things the way they are in the book, by the book, because someone wrote it that way. And there are people who will. Like, I mean, I have not read everything ever by Aleister Crowley. I have read some things. I'm familiar with him. I've watched documentaries and whatnot, but at least have enough knowledge to have a general understanding. Am I going to join the OTO or become or the Thelema? Probably not. I can't see, because that doesn't really appeal to me. I'm not really into ceremonial magic in that sense, or like the Golden Dawn or stuff. It's just not me. Am I going to read about it? Sure, because I like to know things. I like to understand. And whether or not it pertains to my personal practice or who I am is entirely different. There's some books that I've read that are amazing, and there's some books I've read I'm like, oh boy. There's a book called, I think, Revolutionary Witchcraft. I forget the name of the author. It was so bad, I actually use it as it is underneath plants to catch the water that runs off of it, because it was the biggest pile of absolute crap that I've read about, like, witchcraft and activism. Absolute crap. Like, reading this book actually made me angry. And that's why it's under a planter and catches water, because I could give a fuck about this book. So anyways, so that's one side of it. Knowledge is important. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. But I can't imagine calling myself an occultist or practice and never having read a single book on witchcraft or anything, or demonology or whatever. So now the other flip side of that is, because this is where I get a lot of questions, is, and especially now that I'm doing live streams again, I get asked a lot, like, what are your top 5 favorite occult books? I'm like, I have no idea how to even quantify that, because there's so many different categories of things that go into the broad expanse of the occult. Like, what are my favorite occult books on, crystals, or, demonology, or general, or herbalism, or poison path, or I mean, yeah, I can break it down into categories and give you the books in that, but like, I cannot pick like my top 10 occult books, because I don't know, my brain needs categories apparently. So that's something I get asked a lot, and and I guess one of the things, like, for me, it's like, because I run a business, because I have a YouTube channel, I get asked the same question a lot of times. So that's why you'll see me making videos based upon questions I get asked a lot, or things I observe and see. So that's why I make videos. And not for nothing, there are a lot of people, and I don't mean this to sound like a pretentious twat, but there are a lot of people who want their magic and their witchcraft spoon-fed to them by other practitioners, by content creators, by authors, whatever. And what I do is my own shit. Like, I wish I wrote things down better. That would make my life so much easier. As I was flipping through thousands of photos on my phone, I was like, oh, look at this ritual. I wonder what this was. I'm like, I think this was something for this. I wonder what I did. Because guess what? Whose dumbass didn't write it down? It's about developing a practice of your own and educating yourself. So your occult education is important. I can't spoon feed that to you. I can give you recommendations based upon what I've read, or creators that I follow, or people whose work I can, attest to or account for. Or I could say, stay away from this, snake oil salesman kind of person. Um, because reading and digesting content, and you'll find what works for you, whether you like to listen to audiobooks or read like Kindle books, or whether you know, buy a lot of physical books, or watch YouTube videos or documentaries. There's so much content out there now. It's amazing. And I'm old enough to not have had that privilege. To The only access I had was either what was at the local library or at the Walden Books, um, back in the 90s and early 90s and stuff like that. If you happen to live in a town with a metaphysical shop nearby, aces, but that wasn't always the norm, and most of it back then was pretty Wicca oriented. So getting further down the rabbit hole to other stuff was not as easy. So with the access that we have today to all of this amazing occult material, there's no excuse to not partake and to not read, because it's going to help you develop critical thinking skills. It's going to help you look at something and have just a bigger picture, a broader understanding of it. And again, maybe that's just because I studied art history. So, like, I know there's things that I can carry over from having studied art history into my occult practices. Like, I know there's random things I know about African traditional religions because I took a art history class in African art like 20 some years ago. I remember it from there. So a lot of times, like, it within that rubric within art history, there's a lot of things that figure into it that are occult and witchcraft themed over the years. So I learned how to study. I learned how to vet resources. I learned how to, you know, take information from all these different places and pull it together and distill it, and to have a greater understanding of it. And I think that's really important. When you're looking at any of these practices, whatever path you're on in witchcraft, whatever pantheons you work with, whatever traditions you work with, it's important to understand sort of the history of some of these things, and where it comes from. And I would hate to see that get lost or overlooked for those two very disparate reasons of you know occultists who look down their nose at having to read other stuff from people because you should just know how to do it, and or they just don't find meaning or reason in exploring the occult beyond what they know already, and or the people who want things spoon fed to them. I can't spoon feed to you the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of coursework I've done, of videos I've watched, of books I've read, and whatnot. It's all part of what I do, and it's amazing. Like, I will never stop reading and consuming and learning. Like, I get asked a lot, like, oh, do you work with the Cabal or Cliff Huff? I'm like, well, I really haven't at this point, but it's not to say I won't. I mean, may get into it a year or so from now. Right now, I feel like I'm being drawn to um, sort of the Greek mythology a little bit more, like some of the Titans, and there's things that just keep coming up to be like, I've worked with Medusa and Hecate, but like I feel more drawn to like Aradia and sort of the primordials, Titans, and things like that. And it's been a long ass time since I've had any Greek mythology in my diet, so it's something I need to revisit and refresh my memory on. So I may read some books, may watch some videos, and learn a thing, because your education should never stop. You never should be at a point in your life where, like, I know everything I need to know, and there's nothing further I need to do, because I'm gonna call bullshit on that. Um, it's there's so much wider access, as I mentioned before, these things. You don't need to, I mean, and by all means, there are some people like I would love to read all of Mark Allen Smith's stuff. I just right now, spending what $100-200 per book. Went down that road before with other publishers. You know, when you're looking at that knowledge that it has, a hefty price gatekeeping on it, is a little daunting, and it makes it a little more exclusive, in that sense, because not everyone can afford to go slap down $200 for a book, nor will they want to. And sometimes I've slapped down that much, and it's not been that great of a book. Um, you get out of different things that you read. Like I can't imagine doing my job and not having continued my education to learn, and learning by taking courses and reading, um, to help my practice. And, a lot of people talk about doing energy work. I'm like, well, unless you're really formally trained in some form of energy work, uh, there are things you're going to be doing. Like that's something I learned once I took Reiki. Like there were things I was doing that were more detrimental to my own personal energy because I wasn't putting I wasn't kind of channeling the energy without taking of my own. So learning that skill, reading about it, learning the different modalities and practices helped me immensely. Um, and everyone has different learning abilities or disabilities. It's might not be as easy to, digest books if they are not available in, if you're visually impaired, unless they're on audiobooks or you can have a decent screen reader. There's some things that are going to be inaccessible. If you are dyslexic, it might be hard to read a physical book, or have dysgraphia or anything like that. So being able to have a lot of this content that's available on YouTube and other platforms is really helpful for that. Or for someone like me, I learn best sometimes by repetition, but like repetition in different formats. Like I will read a book on the subject, read an audio, have an audiobook on it. I'll watch videos on it. I'll take a course on it. Just so I get like the full big picture understanding of it. Because I think that's important. I couldn't just go, I'm a poison path witch now and start messing around with toxic herbs and selling them and not know what the fuck I'm doing. Um, took some classes, read a fuck ton of books, keep continuing my education on that because it's important to me. It's important to me to, you know, be able to make recommendations to people because I get asked that a lot. I just started doing some book recommendation series. I hadn't really thought about it. But being that I keep getting these questions, it just seemed to me to be able to make a series of being like, here's some books on Lucifer, to get you started. By all means, none of these are going to be exhaustive. This is just shit I happen to have read by the time at the point in time at which I've recorded a video on it. Will I continue to read more? Of course. I love reading. I'm on average, I read probably about 50 books a year. Because that's just how I am. I come from a family of readers. My grandmother read 2 books a week until she died at the age of 90 something. We like to read. That's who we are. It might be something genetic. But again, for me, I come from much more academic background, in research. So, and I worked in higher education for well over a decade at that point. So, that's kind of what I bring to it. And that's how I come about it, is that I come from a much more academic approach. And sometimes that doesn't work in certain circumstances, and sometimes it's very beneficial. Um, but still, at the end of the day, my practice is my own. I may read 100 books on Lilith. I'm still going to work with Lilith in the way that I work with Lilith. I just like to read what other people do. And, what's the worst thing that could happen? I could read something and not agree with it, or oh no, I learned something new. How horrible. So just being able to critically think about how the type of information that's out there, because there is a lot of shitty information out there. Let's just be honest. It depends on the source. And, if you learn how to vet your resources, haven't always been great with that myself, not gonna lie, but, it's being able to do that and to bring that. Like, I think that the amount of reading I do and exploration I do is part of my practice. It is part of my spirituality. It is part of my spiritual growth and ascension. And without that, what the fuck would I be doing, But anyways, I'm just saying again, to read or not to read, fucking read. Because it's important. And, if you're not, I mean, you do you, boo, but on that note, I will get off my academic, researchy soapbox and bid you adieu for tonight. And I'll be back with some more book recommendations, whether you like them or not. I'm going to be breaking them down by topics because, I do get a lot of questions about that. People are curious about poison path stuff or curious about books about, various aspects of the occult and whatnot. So you ask and I will deliver. But anyways, I'm Jennifer, signing off for the night. Live deliciously, not stupidly. Hail yourself.